In this interview, you'll hear from Jonathan Witt, Project Specialist, Outdoor and Environmental Education in the Student Services and Programs Division. Among other topics, he speaks to the importance of crafting realistic proposals and being diligent with funding guidelines and reporting.
Thank you for joining us. If we could get started by having you share your name, your current role at SDCOE, and the department that you're with.
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Jonathan Witt, and my position at SDCOE is Project Specialist, Outdoor and Environmental Education. So I oversee our science outreach programming. So these are science enrichment programs that we bring out to school sites all throughout San Diego County, so we can provide services to all of our 42 school districts, and that is within the Outdoor Education Department.
Great. And Jonathan, what has your experience been with grants, either at SDCOE or with previous organizations?
Gosh, I would say I first got involved with grants about 18 years ago, and that was more on the implementation kind of management side. And really in 2009, that's when I started really kind of getting the experience in terms of actually writing those grants that I was in the long term going to be managing. And I had a wonderful mentor. There was an official grant writer at that time at the organization that I was with, and she really kind of took me under her wing. And I really, asked her, I said, Jane, I really, want to get more experience in terms of beyond just the management side of it, the educational portion of it, but really understanding the nuances of writing a successful grant proposal and that whole process. So she really took me, like I said, really guided me, just gave me some great tips, and just we worked hand in hand. Obviously, for some of the more important ones, she kind of really took the lead, but allowed me to assist in some of the writing portions, and then just really get that experience. So I really say I learned at a true hands-on experience.
And what could you maybe share with others that you've learned along the way, because you've had experience for 18 plus years now? So what are some of the tools of the trade that you've been able to pick up when you're implementing a grant? What's something good that would be important for our colleagues to keep in mind?
Knowing your limitations, as in your personal limitations or your organizational limitations. Obviously, there's potentially lots of money out there, wonderful grants, funders that want to get their mission, get their vision out there. So but oftentimes you want to make sure that you're staying very realistic with what you feel you're able to accomplish, again, as yourself within the organization, and with all other maybe collaborators as well. If you're pulling in other organizations to partner with that grant, you have to make sure that you're all really on the same page. Constant communication and that constant preparation, even throughout from the start to the end, I think is very essential.
What are some of the best practices that you've been able to implement for the grants that you've been in charge of?
I would say the best practices for me, just the diligence, just remembering what your proposal was all about, what the expectations of the funders are, and also kind of knowing that there's an element of adaptability too. Obviously, grants are very specific. But they are across the board. So, some funders are relatively loose, and they just say, as long as the money is going to kind of, match this vision of, us as a funder, and others, are very specific in what you need to actually accomplish, your objectives and so forth. But also it's understanding too that, you may need to adapt, there may need to be adjustments. And as long as there's, an element of transparency and honesty, particularly in any type of reporting, or as that grant cycle goes, I think that is the best practice, because sometimes you may have a situation where, a collaborator has to pull out, or there's some organizational change or some sort of shift that might not necessarily be a complete diversion of what your initial proposal was, because you still need to stay true to that. But I think it's also very important that, you are flexible and can adapt, and then relaying that to the funder as needed and saying, these are some changes. Are we still in line with what you want to fund? And more often than not, there will be a level of understanding with that situation.
Sure. Now, you mentioned reporting. So what are some of the recommendations you would have for our SDCOE friends around reporting and making sure that that part of a grant is kept at the forefront?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of that diligence. I mean, definitely not forgetting it. And I think, again, accurately purporting, I mean, I think, again, your vision, might be one thing when you write that proposal. But then as, that grant cycle progresses, again, things might change. And I think it's, again, being very honest about that. And, I think if, as long as, you show in that reporting that there is that high level of oversight, there is that high level of respect for that funding. Those are really important elements. And if you need, obviously there might be, an official reporting, timeline date, one final report, a midterm, a final report. But I think it's also within reason to have, constant communication if that is welcome with the funder. They might be very, amenable to, just kind of, regular updates, just saying, hey, and they might even want that. They might be the ones emailing you saying, hey, do you want to have a quick meeting, quick chat? How are things going? Is there anything that we can do as the funder to support you? So just know that there's going to be just a broad spectrum of kind of funders and their requirements, and also their willingness to support you along the way. So just be ready for that.
What role do grants currently play in the department and the programs that you're offering on behalf of SDCOE?
I mean, I would say they are vital and critical. And I think oftentimes it's because we're providing these services. Obviously, our science outreach programs are available to any school district, any school. But we do see a lot of underserved communities, rural communities. And one, because that's where our funders want us to go. But oftentimes these are schools where this is maybe their only field trip, in the sense, even though we're coming to them, and the fact that it can be an underwritten program, a program with no cost to the school. I mean, that is huge. So, currently we have a contract with the County of San Diego Public Works. It's stormwater education. It's really, we're going out to these underserved, unincorporated communities. So oftentimes we're going to far east San Diego County, far north San Diego County, and providing these programs to those school sites. And generally, maybe seeing the entire school. Seeing, they might have kindergarten through sixth grade, but they have one class of sixth grade, one class of fifth grade. So we're able to provide these wonderful enriching programs to that entire community. And then we currently have another one with the city of Vista. It's also another stormwater education. So it's going to be working with all of those schools within the district.
I appreciate you highlighting how grants can really be a tool to promote and achieve equity for our students. And so sometimes I think folks might look at a grant to think, well, that's the extra work maybe that we get to do, or we can scale up services, which is of course applicable. But I don't want to mitigate that it is sometimes the only vehicle that we might have in our disposal in certain communities to be able to really achieve equity with our students. So I appreciate you mentioning that. I said before, you've had a lot of experience with grants and a variety of roles that you've held. What has been a challenge with grants in your experience?
Finding grants that truly fit your vision, because I think you can kind of look at the grant process in kind of two ways. Like, you can have this vision in your mind and say, this is the program, this is the experience that I want to implement. I just need the funds, I need the money to do it. I need the partners, I need the collaborators. So there's a challenge there, and there might not be that grant funder that is thinking exactly like you. Or you're looking at all these grants and you say, wow, that's really interesting, but that's not really in my scope of expertise and understanding and really resources. So then that's really not going to be kind of your best path. I think that is definitely, a challenge, that I've seen is just trying to find that grant and those grants that can really support what you want to do. And stay within the reality of your expertise, the resources that you have, and so forth. And then I think too, the challenge are definitely, maintaining that vision once you do funding. And, oftentimes it's that partnership, collaborations are wonderful. Just, whether they're grant funded or not, but you also have to understand too, sometimes if you're working as a collaborative, even if it's within kind of your own organization or with an outside, those visions might change, or, those expectations, might change throughout that course of the cycle. So it's just always, being, just understanding that, those situations may occur. So again, as you're moving through that process.
Now, you came to SDCOE already having a lot of grant experience. So we were lucky in that in your other roles, you had experience with this. But I'm curious to learn, and just want you to be honest. What would have made it easier for you as a new SDCOE employee when you think back to when you first joined? What would have been helpful to you with how we facilitate grants or offer supports? Is there anything that we can do differently and or better for our SDCOE colleagues?
I mean, I think, my experience is kind of very similar to yours. I think because you kind of, I think, if I remember correctly, kind of came into that specific role in and around the same time. So I think you were trying to start to understand as well, what the needs really were for an individual like myself. So I think somebody coming in now, those resources, are there. It's, that support, obviously, sometimes individuals, particularly in the beginning, want to have that support in terms of the actual writing. I mean, that's the experience that I, got, with that mentored grant writer, is I really, I read her proposals and I tried to mirror what I wrote based off of that. And then when I wrote something, I sent it to her and said, Jane, please look over this. Give me that advice. Give me that, critique on the writing style. And I think, that's absolutely valuable to have that right there. Also too, sometimes, those kind of that timeline, that checklist is oftentimes so very important, because we know in all of our positions, we're here, we're there. We can oftentimes, lose track of, oh my gosh, we have to get this on at this date and this time. So I think that is a very valuable resource that is now available to have that support from the grant team.
Thank you. Well, my last question for you is, what has been your greatest joy in implementing grant-funded projects?
I think, there's been so many, but I think definitely kind of a personal one is to oftentimes to see my visions, come to fruition, kind of, become a reality. Because I think that's the wonderful thing with, grant opportunities is you can really think outside the box. Oh my gosh, this would be an amazing program, an amazing experience, an amazing interaction with students, with the public, with whoever your audience is. And that's where your passion is. And if you have the opportunity to, again, to really be able to implement that, that is really, I think, the pure joy. Because you can say, oh my gosh, this is something that may never have happened if I hadn't written that grant, hadn't been successful in receiving that award and having the opportunity to implement it. So, I think for me, that's just been the biggest joy over the years, is to be able to kind of, see my vision as an educator, as kind of a steward of the environment, somebody that wants to, connect with, communities and individuals. And I've been able to do that.
And you've used grants as one of the main vehicles, it sounds like, to be able to accomplish that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been absolutely, a vital component, in that kind of, vision and passion of mine, to be able to utilize that grant funding.
And hopefully when you see that vision come to fruition, as you said, it makes those long hours and all of the bureaucratic tape that we sometimes have to get through really worth it in the end, because you know that your ideas came to life and they had direct impact with students, and you're able to see that. So I know you're doing amazing work on behalf of Outdoor Ed, on behalf of SDCOE, and we hope that this continues and that grants continue to be a part of that portfolio that you all have for the services you offer. And I appreciate you, Jonathan, as my colleague Michelle Hull appreciates everything that you do. And we thank you for your time today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you much for letting me participate.